All right, let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Unite Berlin and the mobile business track. So I'm Ingrid. I head up product for monetization, which includes all the tools and services that helps you effectively acquire users and optimize your players' revenue and lifetime value. We know that as developers, you have to balance growing your business with your players' happiness. And our goal is to build products that empower you to achieve all of these goals. For those of you that have worked with us for quite a while, I think you'll see a transformation over the course of the presentations today in our products, from simply being ads, in-app purchase, analytics, to a connected suite that optimizes for your revenue and retention. As mentioned in yesterday's keynote, we believe that the key to achieving this is really giving you the ability to optimize for a cohort of one, and we'll talk about how that materializes later today. To do this, we have invested a lot in our technology as well as a machine learning system throughout the company. So we have a lot in store for you today, and we're looking forward to share a series of new products and also introduce you to the incredible team we have behind them. On that note, actually, I see a few of them up here, so I'm just going to call them out so you know who they are if you want to harass them later today. So we have Paul, our head of account management, and Dima, our head of business development for Americas, Europe, and Asia. And Jamie, our privacy lawyer, here to answer questions about GDPR. And then Angelo, business development for analytics. Yuho, our product manager on the advertiser side. Felix, our product lead on auction and personalized placement. And Steven, our product lead for in-app purchase. Great. Okay, so the first topic is GDPR. We thought, since it's 9 a.m. and you guys are fresh, ready, and had a good rest last night, we're going to kick off with the most exciting topic. All right, so in all seriousness, though, we know that user privacy is top of mind for many of you and that you may have a lot of questions. So let's tackle that one first. Before we start, I just want to note that we're here to work with all of you in this endeavor. We don't have, all the answers, but we are here to partner with you to navigate all of the different dynamics and the regulations and providing you with the best solution in this constantly changing environment. So with GDPR, we have three constituents. The first one are our regulators. The important thing with them is that we respect their policies. And we have our players. And for our players, it's important to be transparent about what data we use and how we're using them. The second part that's important for our players is giving them the ability to exercise their rights with regards to the regulation. And then for you, our developers, our goal is to help you navigate this dynamic landscape, empower your players to make an informed choice, and protect your business. And by the way, we didn't work alone in the solution that we're about to go through, but we partnered actually with a consortium of free-to-play mobile game developers. There are some big names out there, and I think the consortium represents around 50% of all the free-to-play revenues globally. So together with this consortium, we came up with a balanced solution that met all of the constituents' needs. So let's look at what the solution is. So our approach, the first approach is an opt-out flow. And let's see what it looks like when someone opts out. So, you know, the picture on the right is one of our ads, and you can see an opt-out flow in line in the ad itself. And when someone wants to learn more, they get shown a highlight of the type of data that we collect, and then have the option to then opt out right there and then. And by the way, opting out means opting out from targeted advertising. So they could potentially still see an ad, but contextual ads instead of targeted advertising. But at the end of the day, it is your choice whether or not to implement this opt-out flow or a consent solution that you've developed on your own. If you are exclusive with us and want to implement this opt-out flow, you don't have to do anything. There is no SDK update required. We will automatically, for your players in Europe, show that notification. If we are a demand source within mediation for you, we will respect the flag that is passed to us. And only when the flag is empty, then we show the opt-out flow. So why did we believe that the opt-out flow is the right solution for us? Well, Unity is all about games. And so with this consortium, we were finding the solution that's game-specific. And this is why we work together with game developers instead of other types of developers for this solution. The second thing is that we only collect and use the player behavior and non-personal device information. So the data that we use is very much appropriate for the value proposition that we provide. And finally, the opt-out flow is non-intrusive, which means that it will protect your business better. So what's next? Well, I think this is a journey that we're embarking on together, and I'm sure that the regulations around data privacy will constantly change, and we will help you to navigate them. To enable optimization for lifetime value for cohort of one, I think we have to continue to advance our solution, and we want to give you a solution that is all-encompassing for all types of optimization in your game, not only ads. And so we're working on a solution that you can use for all types of targeting within your game from the editor at Unity. Thank you. And now we'd like to open it up to any questions. Yes? Do you want to come to the mic?
Good morning, all. You only mentioned the one opting out from the Unity ads, but there is also a site for for the Unity analytics.
Yes.
And when you want to collect some non-user privacy data, for instance, how much time a level was visited, let's say, you need to turn on the analytics. But as soon as you turn on the analytics, it also collects a couple of data that is inside the scope of the GDPR, such as the user IP and the user location. And as soon as you turn on the analytics, you cannot really check or uncheck what you want to collect and what you don't want to collect. It goes automatically. So do you have any plans in the analytics dashboard that you can say, okay, I want to turn on the analytics, but I don't want to collect the user IP and the user location, so that I don't need to implement any GDPR-related consent page or screen?
Yeah, that's a great question. Jamie, do you want to answer that?
First off, I have a few constituents in-house at Unity, including the security team. So I can tell you one of the things about GDPR that's hardest to balance is this IP address issue. It is personal information. It very often, particularly if it's a static IP address, and it can be used to know exactly who you are. So there's no question. I'm not questioning that it's personal information, but we are constantly balancing as security professionals how to deal with the fact that it's also very necessary to conduct investigations if you have security issues and you do need to collect IP address. It's a very important data element for maintaining security. So that's a separate issue. So I would doubt we will ever create anything that turns that off entirely because of its value in security. So that having been said, we are looking at how we go about, as Ingrid said, making that plugin that we've created in the analytics dashboard more dynamic, and first off, able to get into more levels of targeting for your games and stuff, more personalization of your games, because the more deeply you personalize something, an experience, the more you need the consent of the player ahead of time to do it. In terms of creating abilities to switch off everything, it's going to depend on if it's necessary for the service that we offer. So even if we're offering a service that does not require consent, but where we can offer it based on our legitimate interest, ours and yours, under the law, and that's specific terminology for those of you who are not familiar with GDPR, although I'm sure everyone here is. But if it's strictly necessary for the service, we'll have to leave those collections on and just make sure that we're good with and we have to do this anyway, to be very transparent with the players, make sure the players understand, what we're collecting and what their rights are to object, or as we call it in Unity, opt out. So I think that's what we will continue to follow, that path and that analysis on every single type of service we offer. But if there is a service that we could offer and not collect the data, we need to not collect that data anyway. But the IP address in particular, I want to tell you, has got some overarching importance in regards to security. So I would doubt that one will ever be turned off. So,
is that clear? Yeah.
The GDPR also tells you that the data that you collect should be stored in the servers in Europe. So we just heard with the integration with the Google Cloud, what are the plans to make sure that this data is stored in Europe?
So all these data rules around the world, whether it's Russia, whether it's Europe, whether it's Brazil, they all sort of start with data localization. But they're never actually as restrictive as you can only store here. It's more like, if you don't store here, here are the things you have to do. And we have to follow along with certain procedures. And I can tell you, I looked at the Google agreement, and we definitely made sure we have the right agreements in place to be able to transfer data as necessary, particularly for connected games. As you know, people may be playing around the world with one another, so we're going to have to be able to facilitate that type of activity. GDPR doesn't prohibit that. What it prohibits is doing that without the right protections in place. And we took a pretty hard look at different providers when we made the decision that we made to go with Google. And they have great pages if you want to look at them for. They're basically our processor. They have a DPA with what's called a DPA with us, and they list all their sub-processors around the world in their pages, and we'll start to, as we put that service together, cite to all of those. And you can see how people are transferring around either under model clauses, or in some cases, if you're transferring like to the US, there's a privacy shield. In some instances, if you're transferring to certain jurisdictions outside of Europe, that country may be subject to what's called an adequacy finding by the European regulators. In other words, their law has been deemed to be adequate, as protective as the European law, so you can transfer to there without much. But for the most part, we're doing it under what are called model clauses that are prescribed by the regulator. And then we have different providers that we work with that are privacy shield. But the Google deal was that was a very deep consideration in terms of how we did it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Hello. Question is the following. Do you see already an impact in your advertising activities, maybe in your ad campaigns, that users opting out and you see an effect in your ad campaigns? Thank you. Yeah.
Actually, we've just been observing the latest data. It's been quite minimal thus far. It's sub like 1 to 2% opting out, and it's been minimal compared to especially for our opt-out flow. We've seen a little bit of a higher rate for opt-out for people that are coming through mediation.
So with GDPR, it's really important that you get the clear consent from the user to your privacy policy. And how do you integrate that the best way in your game without scaring the user off at the beginning because they don't want to read all these terms and so on?
Just to repeat your question, so you're asking what is the best way to implement your consent or opt-out flow for the whole game, not only advertising. Yeah. So as I mentioned, in terms of what's next, that's what we are working on. We're working on a consent or opt-out solution within the editor itself so that you can use it for any purpose of targeting within your game beyond ads, right? Because I'm sure a lot of you developers optimize beyond ads within your game. And right now, what we've seen is that a lot of developers, design their own flow, and we want to help make it super easy for you and standardize it so that it's all easily recognizable from a player perspective, and that they know, okay, this is the best practice that.
Yeah, but I meant it from a user experience perspective. So should I place a big button at the beginning, like check that privacy policy?
I see.
Or?
Well, I think the most important thing is to balance between, making it very clear to the players what this is and the value proposition that you are giving to them in return to giving you consent or not, right? But make it in a way that is, you don't have to click through like 10 different pages. Something very simple, one big action item at the bottom, and go from there. And make sure that they can opt out as well. We've seen some flows that you're like in a cycle, and people are preventing game. You can't play your game unless you click some, button. That's not good practice either.
Ingrid, I would also add, I think what you may be asking too is about when you get acceptance of terms and conditions and privacy policy and those are, remember under GDPR that the things you need consent for can't be bundled in that way, right? So like, I think what you're saying is what we've always thought of as a consent to a privacy policy, but it's much more the case that the way you're supposed to set it up is your privacy policy should say, here's all the uses I'm making of your data, and here's the basis upon which I'm doing those uses. So I'm processing here based on consent, there based on legitimate interest. But remember, for everything you identify inside of that privacy policy that says consent, that needs to be pulled out, unbundled, and put somewhere else to get a separate consent. The consent to the overall, buried over in an overall policy is not going to cut it if you really need a consent for that activity. So I think what you're asking is just, we always have called it a consent to a privacy policy, but the truth is it's a really more of an acknowledgement that you understand it, because if you go down into that privacy policy and start to look at the things that you're doing where you really truly need consent, consent's very clear under GDPR that it has to be unbundled and separate and from those types of things. So I think it's more like an acknowledgement because is what you're really asking about more so than a consent, although I know we've always called it a consent until GDPR.
I see.
Thank you.
Yeah, hello. I wonder if it would be possible under GDPR to make the consent progressive. So because of player engagement, if you start a game and the first thing you see is the privacy policy and tons of switch boxes which you have to turn off or on. Just remember the Tumblr one, if anybody knows that, where they had 200 of them. And of course, that might scare me off of playing, especially if it's a quick and little mobile game. Would it be possible to say, like, okay, the tutorial level, we don't collect any data there, but after that, we ask them for consent because they're already fixed on the actual gameplay, and maybe just scroll through and click it off. Would it be possible even, or do we have to have the consent for the whole product first?
The answer is it depends on how you set it up.
Yeah.
So the first thing is, and this is a very important part of our analysis, even for what we do today already under a legitimate interest analysis, is we took a look at like what is all the data we're collecting and what do we need it for just to run the service effectively for our, both us and our developers. So it's really hard to unmarry the consent from the collection if you don't have any reason other than to have that data other than whatever you need to get consent for. Is it possible, though, if you need the data to sort of drop it into buckets later on for different usages? Like, in other words, you can tag the data such that it has it's turned on for certain usages, and you can turn more tags on over time as you collect the consents throughout the game. I absolutely think that's possible as long as like you have at least a legitimate interest to collect the data in the first instance. Does that help at all?
Yeah, that kind of answers the question, yeah.
Anyone else? Are you sure? Okay, well, we'll be around. So I know this is a complex topic, so please come find us and we'll be happy to answer your questions. Thanks.
Yeah, and I just want to let you guys know, too, I'm around generally throughout the conference. I do have some other work to go do today, but if you let these guys know who are presenting today of any additional questions you have and give your contact information, I'm happy to find you and talk to you about it, okay? Thanks.